Hey there, this is Jexy with the Systems Alliance, and in this news update, I want to discuss how the Netherlands just forced Valve to shut down all the gambling for Counter-Strike Global Offensive as well as Dota 2. So, as I'm sure you guys have been following along, there's been a huge push globally, not just here in the United States, by representatives like Chris Lee of Hawaii and other representatives from across the United States, but the Netherlands, Belgium, Australia, the UK, tons of countries are looking into this right now, and this is the first huge blow. There's been rulings and everything else before, but this is the first time where a game has specifically stopped on a certain date that they can't do this anymore. Oddly enough, EA seems to have seen the writing on the wall, at least in terms of how consumers feel about the whole loot box practice and microtransactions that use gambling mechanisms, because they've now said in multiple games, in fact, this was the only time that people even cheered during the EA press conference, was when they said they weren't going to have loot boxes. So they said Battlefield 5 is not going to have loot boxes, and BioWare's Anthem is not going to have loot boxes either. So with their largest games, they see that consumers are no longer willing to put up with the crap that they're putting out. The one game they are definitely leaving loot boxes in, though, just because it's too lucrative for them, and I'm sure they'll wait until authorities do actually shut them down, is of course FIFA. FIFA is still a huge cash cow, bringing in something like $880 million a year, and most of it's based on gambling mechanisms. Sports games always tend to be viewed separately from regular games. It seems to be a totally different audience that represents their hardcore fans, and so it may not translate all the anger that came around with Star Wars Battlefront 2 and how they were forced to remove all the microtransactions and loot boxes there, as well as then following that up with Battlefield 5 and BioWare's Anthem. So I want to go into what the Netherlands Gaming Authority actually said. And this is just a snippet from their ruling. And really what they're talking about here is Steam, which is owned by Valve, and it's where you can purchase not only CSGO and Dota 2 and other games, but there's also a secondary market that comes from items with simple clothing items that can sell for thousands of dollars, more than in real life. So it really makes no sense, but here's what they had to say. Because the prices can be traded, they get an economic value. Players can earn money if they get a rare item. As a result, the games violate the rules of chance. They are designed as gambling games are designed. So they're saying there is no difference between how these games are designed to monetize and take people's money than, say, a casino. It's the same thing, it just has the skin of a video game on it. They're designed as gambling games are designed, with the feeling that you have almost won, says Marja Appelman, director of the Gaming Authority. There are all sorts of sound effects and visual effects when you open such a loot box, so you have a tendency to play through and through. The Gaming Authority gives the game makers 8 weeks to adjust their games. If this is not followed, the regulator can impose fines or prohibit the sale of the game in due course. So at that time, the Netherlands Gaming Authority had already notified several publishers regarding their games as having these gambling mechanisms in it, these loot boxes and everything, and basically said by the time June 20th rolls around, they will have to be out of the games or we're imposing fines and banning your game. They said the following: the Gaming Authority will check whether game companies have made adjustments to their illegal loot boxes, treasure boxes, in games. If they have done so, it will be checked whether the adjustments are sufficient to no longer be able to be characterized as a game of chance as described in the Betting and Gaming Act. The ruling goes on to discuss various levels of what is allowed and not allowed, but there is a section on gambling addiction. Concerns at the Gaming Authority are mainly about the fact that there are indications that loot boxes encourage gambling addiction. There's consensus worldwide that gambling cannot be played by minors. An adjustment that providers could make is replacing the loot boxes in their game with direct buy. Those are virtual items that are known in advance, can then be purchased. This is what you're seeing not only with Anthem, but Battlefield 5. They will have no impact on the gameplay, they'll be cosmetic only, and they will have a price tag attached to them in the beginning. I spoke about this before in another video when I was talking about BioWare and Mass Effect 2. So Mass Effect 2, there was no online play, so there really wasn't much to buy. They had great DLC, but that offered you hours hours and hours of new gameplay content, so people would shell out the money for that because it's like buying a mini game almost. A smaller portion of the game for a smaller price. One that directly impacted the story as well and continued it. But what they also had, they had some cosmetic things. So for your squad mates, they would have different outfits for them. They started with two main ones, the one you start with and then the one you can upgrade to once they became loyal. But outside of that, there wasn't much special. Then, as they started releasing more content, they did add a few outfits and they would be for, like $3 or $5, and you'd get a whole set of them. Some people bought them, some people didn't, some just didn't really care. Some liked the original outfits more anyway, but some liked the new ones, and so they could buy them and you knew exactly what you were getting. You saw pictures of them and everything, and there was the price right there, which was usually a small amount. Nothing like thousands of dollars like these gambling websites for CSGO and Dota 2 are up to, but just like $3, $5. If you want to pay, maybe you could get them on sale, but something reasonable. That would be something that would be in line with the Netherlands Gaming Authority. The loot boxes, however, would not. As far as enforcement of these rules go, if it turns out that the game companies have not made sufficient adjustments, the phase of enforcement will start. To this end, the Gaming Authority has various options. For example, administrative fines can be imposed of up to 830,000 euros. So at that point, you're talking just under $1 million. If administrative enforcement does not prove effective, the Gaming Authority can appeal to the Public Prosecution Service to prosecute criminal proceedings. So obviously, they're not messing around. They're dealing with these illegal gambling mechanisms that are targeting children, just as America did with the mafia, with their illegal gambling. There really is no difference going on here. The only difference is that at least the mafia knew what they were doing was illegal, whereas these companies and their loot boxes are still for some reason trying to fight it because it's making them so much money. Also in the letter, it does mention clarity as well. In addition, they say if the Gaming Authority imposes a fine or measure, it does become public. So at that point, the publisher is going to be in the news, their game is going to be in the news about how they're illegally targeting children for gambling. That is a PR nightmare that no publisher wants. So they're obviously going to stop doing this. And as you can see here, this is exactly what's going on. Players who went into the store to try and buy these items / gamble for these items were given this letter when they logged in. Dear Counter-Strike Global Offensive customers, in May, we received 2 letters from the Dutch Conspiratoriate stating that Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Dota 2 contain loot boxes that violate the Dutch Betting and Gaming Act. The Conspiratoriate accusation is different from how other countries think about loot boxes, so we hired Dutch legal counsel, looked at the recent study into loot boxes published by the Conspiratoriate, and learned more about Dutch law. We still don't understand or agree with the Conspiratoriate's legal conclusion, and we've responded to explain more about CSGO and Dota 2. In the meantime, we have a threat from the Conspiratoriate to prosecute Valve if we don't implement a remedy by June 20th. The letters don't tell us how to do that, but the study into loot boxes does contain one rather simplistic statement. Loot boxes contravene the law if the in-game goods from the loot boxes are transferable. Loot boxes do not contravene the law if the in-game goods from the loot boxes are not transferable. So for now, the only practical alternative is to disable trading and Steam Marketplace transfers for CSGO and Dota 2 items for Dutch customers. We apologize to you for this inconvenience. We hope that after more engagement with the Conspiratoriate, they may refine their legal demands and we can find a solution that is less inconvenient. So first of all, they're acting like, oh, we don't know what's going on. Oh my God, loot boxes? That's not bad. Kids spending thousands of dollars on a digital shirt for a character? Come on, guys. You know something's wrong with that. Also, they try to paint the Netherlands like they're the outlier here. No, they're just the first ones in a long line of countries looking into this. As I said before, Belgium's looking into it. The UK's looking into it. Germany is looking into it now. Australia, not to mention the United States, which is a huge market. And they're acting like the EU won't come down on them either. I'm sure you've been receiving a bunch of notices on your phone about how all the apps and everything that you subscribe to is changing their privacy laws. That was because the EU doesn't mess around when it comes to this type of stuff. They changed the laws, and thus every company in the world had to change what they do. Because once you're a company like this that sells not only in Europe, but United States, Asia, all of it, You can't have separate rules for some things and separate rules for another. It's just too difficult. Same thing with loot boxes. Once the rest of the EU catches on, you're more likely going to say goodbye to loot boxes. The companies who make so much money off of this are really trying to avoid that. So let me know what you think about this. Do you think that the laws will be changing for the rest of Europe? Do you think this is the first shoe to drop and that there's just going to be more to come from other countries over and over and over until eventually there won't be any illegal gambling targeted at children? And I say children because granted that's who plays a lot of video games, but really the people who grew up with video games now are adults. It's not like we like it either. It's not something that anyone likes. If people want to gamble, they will go to a casino. But otherwise, governments control gambling. This is the one thing they do. They do it because they found it to be harmful to minors. So this is just something that they have to take a hold of because companies like Valve, like EA, like Activision keep taking advantage of it. Personally, I think this is good news, but let me know what you think going forward. And when do you think the next shoe will drop as far as a country outright banning loot boxes? I look forward to reading what you guys have to say, and we'll see you next time.